What's up, folks? Today we're going to be talking about audio effects. We're going to hit up several different effects. We're going to talk about the most basic ones that everyone uses for everything, EQ. We're going to talk about compression. We're going to also talk about delay and reverb. And we're also going to talk about some time-based effects, such as chorusing and flanging. So, let's get into it. Boom. All right. So the first thing we're going to get into is EQ. All right, so when working with EQ, essentially what EQ is you're dealing with the frequency spectrum of 20 to 20,000 hertz, the audible hearing spectrum, and we are going to utilize different filters, which are like kind of shapes, filters that will basically roll off and boost different parts of the frequency band. Parts of the spectrum. So the first ones we're going to talk about are high pass and low pass filters. So today I'm using Ableton to kind of demonstrate this, but on the low end, to control the low end, you will use a high pass filter. Okay, this filter right here is called a high pass filter. Even though it affects the low end more than anything, the key is inside the word high pass filter. The high frequencies pass through, the low frequencies are the ones that get rolled off. Okay, so the opposite of that is a low pass filter, which looks like this, and a low pass filter will allow the low frequencies to pass through, and you will be rolling off the high frequencies. Okay, so just as a little demonstration, we'll listen to how this affects sound. And the main thing we're going for and utilizing as far as the parameters that we're going to be changing with high pass and low pass filters, your main one is the frequency, and that's going to be basically which frequency band it starts to roll things off or kind of, cut things off. And the slope of this curve here is usually, the parameter is usually called Q, which is kind of like a slope of the curve. Different plugin effects will have different visual kind of reactions to this. The EQ8 in Ableton sort of boosts a band of the of this filter before rolling it off when you tweak the Q too much. So not all of them do that, but let's give it a listen and see what it sounds like. All right.
Yo.
Okay.
Go.
So this is my voice, obviously.
I want to say some things to you today.
And
yo,
we'll turn off that flanger.
Yo.
As I use a low pass filter,
go. Hey.
You notice the high frequencies start to disappear, allowing the low frequencies to pass.
Here we go. Yo.
Okay.
Here we go.
So on the opposite side,
hey,
we've got
I want to
a high
say
pass
some
filter.
things to you today. Hey. Yo. Here we go. Yo. Here we go. Go. Hey, I want to say some things to you today.
So you can notice you start to roll off the low and high end. These are very, very, very useful tools in a lot of different situations where you want to control some of the low end or remove some of the low end from a sound. High pass filters are very often used in live and studio sound just to get rid of the lower frequencies. It can also help with bleed from instruments, like in the drums. As an example, you might have hi-hat sounds and you have a kick drum right next to it and you hear the kick drum bleeding into the hi-hat. Well, you can use a high-pass filter to remove the kick drum. So whatever the application is, many ways to use these and improve the tone of your instrument track. Okay, cool. So moving along with the filters, besides the high-pass and low-pass, we have notch filters. Notch filters or band filters focus on a specific frequency band. And what you can do with that specific frequency band is you can boost it by turning up the gain on your EQ, or you can cut it by decreasing the gain. Okay, so you can kind of pinpoint with surgical precision a specific frequency that's troublesome, and you can use a narrow Q, which is kind of talking about that slope of that curve, whether it's really narrow and focused or a little bit wider and smoother. You can find a certain frequency that you like and give it a little boost so you hear more of it, improving articulation, like maybe around like the 4K area where that really harsh bitey attack element is in a lot of instruments. You can boost some of that or you can cut some of that if that's what you don't want. So these tools also can be used to kind of fish around and find a frequency that you like or don't like, and then remove it or boost it. So as an example, let's do that with the track again.
Yo, yo, here we go. Go.
Okay, I'm going to make my cue a little bit
I want to say some things to you
wider.
today. Hey, yo, here we go. Yo, yo, here we go.
So maybe I don't like that frequency right there, and I want to remove it.
Yo, yo, here we go. Go.
So I might do something like that to control a frequency. If I want more of a frequency, like there's not enough articulation in something, like I'll fish for it and find that frequency.
Yo, yo, here we go. Go. Hey, I want to say some things to you today.
Maybe I want this whole area right here to be a little bit boostier, so I can change the cue and widen it. I found that area I want to boost a little bit, maybe do it more subtle.
Yo, yo, here we go.
Okay, so whether I want to be super exact with it and narrow, I can find a focused frequency and boost it or cut it, or I can be a little bit more general and find a general area of the frequency band that I want more or less of. So depending on whether you're shaping individual instrument tracks or you are mastering audio, you will use filters like that to pinpoint a certain general area and give it a very subtle boost or cut. You're very kind of like subtle with mastering, but you might be a little bit more aggressive with different instrument sounds that you want to really kind of roll off areas of them. So those are notch filters. Okay, cool. So moving right along, the final pair of filters I'm going to talk about are high and low shelf filters. These things appear a lot of times on parameters, on plugins that look like a little wishbone symbol like this. Okay, so that wishbone basically shows you that you can boost or cut these high or low frequencies and form kind of a shelf where it basically rolls off the frequencies but then flattens out. So it's a little bit more subtle than a high pass or low pass filter, but kind of accomplishes the same thing. Got too much highs? Well, let's roll some of them off around about there, cut them down. Or we need more highs, it's too dark. I might kind of shelf up around the higher frequency spectrum areas and boost it a little bit. Okay, so on the low end of things, you have low shelves that look like a wishbone that kind of go the opposite direction. So it's the same deal. So I might apply this. Let's see if I can do it with a voice again.
Yo, here we go.
So maybe I want a little bit more highs, a little crispier.
I want to say some things to you today.
There we go. Okay.
Yo.
Maybe I want less lows, but not remove them.
Here we go. Go. Hey, I want to say some things to you today.
Okay, so I'll just kind of work these so you can hear them.
Yo, yo, here we go. Go. Hey, I want to say some things to you today. Hey, yo, here we go. Yo, yo, here we go. Go. Hey, I want to say some things to you today. Hey, yo, here we go. Yo, yo, here we go. Go. Hey, I want to say some things to you today. Hey, yo.
Okay, cool. So that's some shelf filters. Awesome. All right, moving right along, let's talk about compression. So compression is kind of a complex topic. Compression basically affects dynamics. Okay, it's a dynamic, almost like an automated dynamic tool. And what compression will do is it will take the volume and it will turn it down. Okay, just like almost like a robot's hand on a fader, like a volume fader. So when the music gets louder or there's a sound that pops up all of a sudden super loud, there is a threshold set, kind of like a level of volume set, to where when the sound interacts with that, the compressor engages, the robot turns the sound down, either in a quick manner and releases it in a quick manner, or in a slower manner, racks slower, and then rebounds slower. So the speed at which it turns something down real quick or slow is the attack. And the opposite side, the release, is how long it takes the volume to kind of come back up to zero again, back up to unity. Okay, so it's kind of like the recoil. It can be really quick and snappy, or kind of slow and delayed. So this is volume only, does not affect like the tone. But another aspect of the slow or fast response to turning things down or turning things back up is it shapes the envelope, which can add articulation. Okay, so on a compressor, you're dealing with several different parameters. Let's take a tour through some of the ones that we see on Ableton's native plugins. So on the compressor here, in Ableton, we have threshold. We have another meter, and you can change the threshold by moving this little diamond around or this little triangle. The gain reduction, which is how much volume is being turned down, also called attenuation. So either attenuation or gain reduction, it'll say something like that, ATT sometimes abbreviated, but this is how much volume is being turned down and how it's moving, whether it's quick or slow, or you'll see the way that dial moves or that meter reads. Output is the volume output. Okay, so sometimes when you use a compressor, you compress the sound, you turn things down, everything gets a little bit quieter, the dynamic range is smaller. The high and low volume, extremes of volume fluctuation or amplitude of sound is going to be minimized, and then you can bring that up to compensate. And that's another thing that people use compression for, beyond just kind of tightening up a sound or shaping it a little bit, is making it louder. A lot of times when you compress something and decrease the amount of volume dynamic range, you can bring that up and make that sound a lot bigger. Okay, so the output gain is a compensation, sometimes referred to as makeup gain, for how the volume suppression that's been happening can be adjusted for in the gain output gain out of that device can be turned back up. Okay, so let's hear some of this in action, then I'll talk about some of the other aspects of this. So here we go. Here's some voice again.
Yo, here we go. Go. Hey, I want to say some things.
I'm going to bring the threshold down to a point at it's going to start to interact with the gain reduction and result in gain reduction. So you can see that the volume spikes are around about here. And then when I bring this down past that, we start seeing compression happen. Okay, gain reduction, some unknown amount right here because it doesn't tell how many dB, but I also see that my output gain is a little bit louder now. So I can compensate for that loss of volume and make it a little bit louder. Okay, so that's basically what I would do with a compressor real quickly, is just turn on the compressor, put it on, bring the threshold down, start seeing some gain reduction, maybe boost it up a little bit, and listen to it. Very critical to listen to it. As I get more detailed and more specific to trying to change the articulation, the sound envelope of the sound, I will play around with the attack and release, and I will also sometimes adjust the ratio. So we talked about attack and release. Ratio is basically it's the ratio between the input and the output level of the compressor. It's almost like a wet-dry knob. Even though there's a wet-dry knob right here, it's kind of like the percentage of the signal that is being compressed mixed with the original signal coming out of the speakers. So you don't 100% compress everything unless you are limiting it. And that's what a limiter is. It's basically a compressor where you have 100% of the sound being compressed. So what's great about that is when you're mastering or something, limiters they have what's called a ceiling rather than like a threshold. There's like a finite level of volume that the sound will never pass, and that makes it easier to master because then you can bring up the volume of something to the most extreme level right at unity gain where it's almost peaking, and it will never bounce across that ceiling level. So limiters are much like compressors, only that they have a ratio that is, all the way is 100%, right? Okay, so let's hear some compression, and let's play around with the attack and the release. I might go to a kick drum here and see if I can maybe make some of that happen on the kick drum. Okay, so I've got a kick drum going. Let's go back to no compression. Okay, a little bit of compression happening, maybe a lot of it. Now I'm going to change the attack to be very short. So kind of what I hear is like more sustain. Boom, 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 boom. Not so much a punchy attack, but a big, warm, long, sustained sound. So I'm going to back this off a little bit. Now what I'm noticing, it's got more of a punchy front end. Okay? That's because the compressor, the robot arm that's turning down the volume is late to the party. Let's look at it in this situation here. So here's the volume peaks popping up, the kick drum booming down here, and then we can see how the compressor's late to the party. It lets that initial volume spike, the initial attack of the sound, get through, and then it turns it down afterwards, thus accentuating the attack. So a slower attack time accentuates the punch, the attack of the note, where a quicker attack time can kind of wipe it out right away, thus kind of minimizing the expression or the punch or the bite of a sound and making it easier to control, but making it a little bit fatter because it doesn't get loud and soft real quick. It just kind of like gets to a certain level and then kind of plateaus. Now, the release is how quickly it recoils. So one of the things I always look for in a compressor, I usually kind of watch it in this setting, I look for the space between the notes. It's a rhythmic thing. So how quickly the compressor recoils will shape the tail end of the note, making it sometimes more sustained. So I can tighten it up and make it less sustained by using a slower attack time, or slower release time. The compressor stays closed, doesn't recoil as fastly, and everything's kind of quieter and more compressed, and also shorter. All I hear is a pop, pop, pop. Might be a good thing. If I want that kick drum to sound like that, that's what I want, I'll do that. Now, if I want it to be fatter and wider, have more sustain, I make it a quicker release time. You can hear this boom, 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 boom. So a quick attack and a quick release kind of makes the notes bigger, warmer, less attack, but more swelling, sustained. Where if I go with a slower attack time, maybe middle of the road release, I can get a little bit more of an accentuated pop, pop, pop. Okay? So, that's the basics of compression. There are many other settings on a lot of compressors beyond the basic stuff here. I'll talk just real briefly about this. So sidechain compression is a concept where you can feed audio from another track. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to throw a compressor on my voice. Not because I want to compress the voice, but because I want to make the voice pulsate, much like that kick drum does. So there's a compressor on my voice. Let me arm this so we can all hear my beautiful singing. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do here is turn on the sidechain compression. I'm going to use a different track. I'm going to use, oh crap, they're all both called audio. Let me rename that. Audio 1. Maybe that'll help. Okay, so back to my compressor over here. Input from audio 1. Okay, I've got my kick track over here kicking pretty loud, and you can see now that the compressor is now pulsating based on that kick drum track. It's on my voice track, but it's pulsating and responding to the transients from my kick track. And what you get,
so you can hear sidechain compression. On singing along notes, so you can hear sidechain compression.
Okay, so that's sidechain compression. What's going on is the compressor is pulsating, turning down the volume to a rhythmic pattern because of the kick drum track that's feeding it and causing it to compress, but it's compressing my voice track, not the kick drum track. So that's sidechain. It's a sidechain. It's another track parallel, but it's actually affecting a different track. There are EQ filter aspects that you can shape the sound of the compression, make it brighter, only compress the bright end of it, or you can filter the signal before it gets into the compressor. It's almost like putting a EQ, high pass or low pass or something, before the compressor. You just kind of take all the low junk out or take all the high stuff out that might be causing you, bleed or something and maybe affecting the compressor, so you can kind of trigger, filter out those things before that. Knee is another subject I want to talk about real quick. Knee is kind of a confusing thing, but it's along the same lines as it reminds me a little bit of ratio in the way that it sounds. So if I go back over here to my kick drum track, I'm looking at my compressor and get rid of that voice sound there. Let's look at knee. Okay, so A hard knee, as opposed to a soft knee, a soft knee is going to have a little bit of a rounded shape. So basically at a certain level here, a certain dynamic level on this graph, that's when the compressor's threshold is set, and that's when the compressor starts turning down the volume. Now, to soften it and warm it up and make it less like obvious that the compressor is kicking on and some robots jerking the volume down, it starts to kind of jerk down the volume a little bit before it hits that level. There's kind of a squishiness to it. You know, I like the analogy of like a shock absorber to a compressor. You know, your volume spikes are coming, these bumps on the road, and you kind of absorb those bumps and soften the blow of dynamic fluctuations and how punchy and quick that is. You can soften that, limit the range with this shock absorber that kind of turns down the volume when the big waves come, and it kind of like, less affect volume fluctuation, less waves in the ocean. And this knee can kind of soften that by, moving the point at which it starts to compress a little bit ahead and a little bit behind. So it's kind of smoothing out that threshold. Okay. And then of course the ratio, you can kind of see how that changes the angle. It's like how much of the signal is being compressed? None of it, or half or quarter, or all of it, and that's a limiter. Okay. And then the knee, kind of like how extreme, what point is that going to roll off, and how abrupt is that going to sound? Okay, cool. So compression, boom. Lots of applications. We could go on all day about compression, but you use it to control the dynamic range. You can boost up the volume of the track because of it, and because you can have changes in how quickly it responds to volume down and up swings, with the little robot fader arm on the controller, fading the volume up and down. You can kind of shape the envelope and produce more punch and attack, or you can make the notes more sustained and long, whatever you're going for. Okay, cool. Let's move on. The next things I'm going to talk about are delay and reverb. I use these together because, well, they kind of sound similar. People get these confused. But let's talk about reverb first. So reverb is a effect that creates a synthetic room sound. So if I was in a cave, you would probably hear my voice echoing all over the chambers of the cave because I'm in a cave. If I'm in a bedroom with studio dampening material and sound baffles around me, it's going to sound not like a cave. Maybe less like a bedroom, hopefully. But I'm in a bedroom, right? So you can hear that. So that's what reverb does. It creates those ambient spaces that we're having our sounds existing in or not existing in. We can use that to create space in our mixes. So with reverb, it's a spatial thing. One of the huge aspects of it is wet and dry. Now, when you're using reverb, I never really throw reverb on a track specifically. I will use a reverb send and return type of situation where you send some of the signal from this track over to another track that only has a reverb plugin on it, and that's so I don't muddy up the original sound. So just to clarify that, I usually use return tracks for reverbs and delays because I don't want to cover up the original vocal track with a shitty reverb. I want to put a shitty reverb next to my clean vocal so I have the two things in parallel and I can control how much reverb is in there, and I still have a nice clean punchy vocal track. And if your vocal tracks are not clean and punchy sounding, it's probably because this might be one of those things that you're doing that might improve that. So anywho, to the reverb. As we listen to reverb, we can hear, it sounds like I'm in a, cave, a small cave.
I want to say some things to you today.
Okay, so a lot of reverbs have a lot of preset things you can choose from. That's usually what I operate with. If I go to some sort of reverb plugin, I will go and hunt through all of the presets. So let me just open up this one. This is a Lexicon one, but you notice it says large light plates 2. And then boom, here's a bunch of different presets. Most of the time, I'm just going to fish around the presets. Large plate, okay, cool. And plate reverbs sound like the old metallic plate reverb idea that was developed back in the day, probably at Abbey Road. There's chambers where you pump music into a giant room and you have a microphone and a speaker in the same room, and that's how they created chamber delay back in the day. Just, super basic, but very effective because it was real sound in a real room recorded with a real mic, and then they'd mix that in with the band, and it sounded like they were in a in a big room together, even though they're in tiny little studio rooms. So these are kind of modeling like the original concept of this thing, and then now it's a digitized plugin. But large, dark, it's a large room, it's going to sound darker. Short, bright, bathroom, tile, kitchen, bathtub, sink, like all these weird things. You imagine yourself in a sink in a bathroom, and that's what it's going to sound like. So there are several parameters on any plugin that can confuse the thing beyond that, but mainly size. That's one of the main ones. That's going to be how big the room sounds, right? How big it is. The wet dry knob, that's another really cool one to know about. If you're using a return track situation where you have a reverb on a return track, you will want the dry knob up to 100% wet. But if you're putting it on some sort of like instrument, like a guitar or something, you're going to use the wet dry knob to dial in how much reverb there is.
Here we go.
It's like I don't need much. There we go. 16, 17% I start to hear it. Okay, cool. So reflections, early reflections, different filters. That's the same idea as putting a high pass or a low pass filter on my voice before I feed it into the plugin. I can roll off some of the lows and just focus on the high frequencies. Or I can roll off the highs and just make my reverb sound darker because there's no high frequencies coming into the reverb unit. It's filtered out by then.
Here we go.
Okay, so darker, brighter. These filters can be used. Pre-delay is an interesting concept. So this basically, reverb is like a sound in a space, right? So if I yell at the wall, my voice is going to ricochet off the wall, come back at me, and that's when I start to hear reverb. And it sprinkles everywhere else in the space, going everywhere in all directions, reflecting off of all the surfaces. So the early reflection of the pre-delay is the first, slapback of that sound, which is a reality of the physical nature of sound traveling through spaces. So I can set that time delay to, capture the size of the room, or I can set it to kind of lock into the beat. So if there's a slap back like, hey, it pops back at me, I can make that rhythmically timed with the beat.
Here we go. Hey, I want to say some things to you today. Hey, here we go.
Right? Now it's just right away. Short. Pre-delay.
I want
no
to
pre-delay.
say some things to you today.
Instantly reverb happens, or it happens after it slaps back after a millisecond or a few hundred milliseconds.
Here we go.
Okay, so it's a time-based thing. You're messing almost like reverb. Delay, almost like a delay. So several other effects and parameters that you can tweak with these things, but generally that'll kind of get you going. Density, this is all like tonal aspects of the sound. Diffusion, you can add chorus, there's all kinds of stuff. But you just kind of find something that sounds good. Presets are really nice, but all these extra parameters can help you shape a generic reverb and make it sound a little bit boutique. If you really know what you're looking for, you can shape this, native plugin to sound pretty darn good if you know exactly how to use the parameters. Okay, let's talk about delay. Delay is different than reverb because it is echoes, right? Delay sounds like echo. So when I turn on a delay, essentially with delay, it's an echo. Right? It could go on for a while. Or it can be very short. Like a slap back. Just kind of comes back at you real quick. So it's an echoing thing, okay? So you have, usually in a delay plugin, you're going to have like feedback, which is how long that echo is going to kind of continue for before it dies out. So for instance, like I'll show some of that. Right, it kind of goes on for a while, trails for a while. If I go really high with the feedback, it'll go forever. Okay, so you can find the sweet spot in there, whatever you're trying to go for. So these also can be changed between left and right. If you delink them, you could have one doing like a 16th note, quarter note, whatever. These numbers here on the delay setting for the native Ableton delay has 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, and these are like, different subdivisions of 16th notes, quarter notes, 8th notes. So let's that's a really quick delay, maybe 30 seconds. It's maybe 16ths. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not. There's no metronome going, so it's kind of hard to tell. But
Yo.
maybe that's quarter notes. I don't know. So anyway, these are like different subdivisions of beats, right? Quarter notes, eighth notes, 16ths, 32nds, 64ths, just da 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 da, depending on the beat. You can change these to be time based, which is probably more useful when I'm trying to do like a slap back delay. So if I want it to just like sound like it's just like echoing really quickly back at me,
Yo.
and phasing almost.
Got. Yo. Here we go. Got. Hey, I want to say some things to you today.
So, if you're going for that tape fluttery kind of, slap back delay, you're going to have just like a short millisecond based time increment and maybe change the feedback to be shorter or longer.
Yo. Here we go. Yo.
All right. Or if I want some sort of like rhythmic da 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 da.
Yo. Here we go.
No, don't.
Hey, I want to say something.
Okay, so going between those two settings, you get those two different effects. I'd say it's a little bit more analog-y if you're going for that short slap back, fluttery tape kind of sound. You're going to set it to be kind of a slap back mode. Oh, wait, okay, so there's a wet and dry knob here too, so you can change how much of that is happening. Or how much of that signal is mixed with the original signal, so that you can have kind of the subtleties of it, or you can go crazy with it and have it 100%. So it's super loud. So that's delay. It's like echo, right? Reverb is like a space, sounds like a room or a house or something, or a cave. Okay, let's move on here to time-based effects. These are probably the most confusing ones, but there's a lot of science going on here and they sound cool. So chorusing is a term for like a chorus. Think of a chorus. What's a chorus? A choir. It's a bunch of people singing together, right? A bunch of humans that don't sing perfectly in pitch with each other, and it's kind of waving around. They're kind of a little bit out of phase with each other, out of sync, but close enough. It sounds like a big bunch of people singing together, right? It's a sound. So chorusing is basically recreating that idea of two sounds not perfectly matched happening. So the way it does it is it takes the audio signal and it produces another one, mixes it together, but with a delay to it. So it's a little bit later. It's like having two tape recorders playing at the same time, and then one's a little bit behind the other, and being affected a lot of times, modulated with some sort of low frequency oscillator. So basically the pitch, is kind of like shifting around on the secondary one. So it's kind of got this in and out, almost perfect, but not quite in tune, not quite lined up. And it just kind of swells around, and it sounds like it's, like a bunch of people singing together, or maybe just one person that sounds like has a chorus effect on it. But let's hear some of that on our voice.
Yo.
Turn off the delay, of course, and the compressor. Duh.
Yo.
Maybe I'll sing. Maybe we can hear it a little bit better if I sing into it. Let's put that on the singing vocal track. Oh, here we go. Now we're getting chorusy.
I'm singing a long note so you can hear sidechain compression. I'm singing a long note so you can hear sidechain compression. I'm singing a long note so you can hear sidechain compression.
Okay, so basically you hear the two different voices kind of together, and as I move them around, one's kind of shaken quickly. So we have rate, the amount, the wet-dry mixture of that. There's two different delays here. We got delay 1, which is the first thing that's 3 milliseconds late to the party. The duplicate of the signal, just a little bit back. Then there's the second one that's maybe modulating, or maybe we can make it fixed or something.
I'm singing a long note.
There we go. So basically that was delayed a little bit further. So we have like 3 different voices happening. The original, the first delay, the second delay. It's like creating a chorus out of one voice. All right. So similar but different, we have the flanger. So flangers are kind of interesting. Interesting little history thing I read about this on Wikipedia, of all places, is this flanger idea was basically developed kind of in the George Martin Beatles era. I guess the story is maybe they were the first people to do it or something, but anyway, it became a thing that people did. You have 2 signals played from 2 different tape machines, and one of them, you put your finger on it, right? So the flange is like the kind of like the outer rim of the tape wheel, and you put your finger on it and kind of like drag it, slow the tape spinning down so that it gets a little bit behind the other one, and then it creates this like filter sweep kind of sound. And then you do it to the other side reel, and you slow that one down, and it matches back up and it goes behind it. Then you just kind of crisscross back and forth between slow this one down, slow that one down, slow, and it becomes like this kind of like a filter sweep sound, because the things are slightly out of phase and then coming back into phase, slightly out of phase, back into phase. 2 different channels going, left and right speakers, or left and right, whatever, tape machines. So it sounds like a filter sweep. Let's hear some of that.
Oh, I'm singing a long note so you can hear sidechain compression. Oh, I'm singing a long note so you can hear sidechain compression.
There we go. You hear that?
Oh, I'm singing a long note so you can hear sidechain compression.
Okay. Yeah. So you've heard that on, Pink Floyd records, several things, even, back to the Beatles and Jethro Tull and all that kind of good stuff. But essentially sounds like a filter sweep kind of thing going on in the high register, depending on how you set it. But it's like 2 sounds. One's duplicated. The second one is delayed, and then the other one's delayed, and it catches back up, and it kind of just cycles back and forth. Whatever kind of thing you going on. So once again, another time-based effect. We call them time-based effects because they, the rate at which they cycle around, that's a time-based thing. The chorusing, the phasing issue between 2 different sounds, that's a time-based thing. How many milliseconds late is that second, sound? Okay, cool. So that should cover most of the main audio effects that you will use. There's many audio effects. We can go into several for days and days and days. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace out.